Okay, there's been a lot of debate on here about whether leather is actually more sustainable than vegan leather alternatives, or vice versa. So let's talk about it. I've been a shoe designer for over 10 years. I have my own shoe brand. I've worked with all kinds of materials: leather, polyurethane, textiles, eco alternatives, you name it. I'm here to share some objective information I've learned throughout my career. This video is not going to go into ethics, that's a whole other topic of conversation. So let's talk numbers. One study compared bovine leather, polyurethane or PU leather, and mycelium leather. Okay, starting with CO2 emissions, leather is the highest at about 21 kilograms per square meter of leather. Next, water use. Leather uses an incredible amount of water, not only during the farming phase, but also during the tanning phase. Next, we have toxicity. Leather comes at the highest, particularly during the tanning phase, especially with chrome tanning, while PU and mycelium are much lower. Now, fossil fuels. Here, PU is the worst, since it's fully synthetic. So on paper, leather has the heaviest environmental footprint across the board. But here's the nuance. Leather can be more durable than polyurethane or mycelium leather. Let's talk about PU's lifespan. PU looks a lot like leather, but it's actually a thin synthetic coating on a textile backing. With normal wear, low-quality PU can start cracking, peeling, or bubbling within 2 to 5 years. But throughout my career, I've definitely worked with polyurethane that has lasted over 10 years. So I really do think it's a case-by-case situation. Now let's compare that to leather. A lot of leathers out there are heavily coated with synthetics, so I'm not talking about those. But typically speaking, leather, when well taken care of and maintained, can last 10, 15, 20 years, even decades. So that's why some people argue that leather's durability justifies its heavier footprints. But here's where it gets interesting. In practice, people aren't actually taking care of their leather shoes, let alone keeping them for 20 years. Each year, the US throws away about 300 million pairs of shoes. It's safe to say that around 20% of those discarded shoes are leather, which means 60 million pairs of leather shoes get discarded in the US every single year. That's like every American tossing a pair of leather shoes once every 5 years. Now, of course, there are exceptions to everything. If you've had a pair of leather boots like I have for 20 years, that's great. But realistically, today, the average lifespan of leather shoes in the US is not that different to the lifespan of PU shoes. Next, let's talk about the argument that leather is a byproduct of the meat industry. And again, I'm focusing on cows. Yes, hides or skin come from meat cows, but they're not waste. They have real value. If not used for leather, they can go into gelatin, collagen, pet food, fertilizer, or even energy. And in life cycle studies, leather is actually allocated 5 to 10% of the cow's entire environmental burden, sometimes more, because hides are an economic driver, not free waste. Now let's talk about microplastics. Yes, polyurethane, as it peels and breaks down, can release microplastics into the environment. But in a previous video, I explained how most leathers are not biodegradable, especially not chrome tan leather, and that leather can actually leach chromium-6 into the environment, which, if we're playing devil's advocate, one could argue that chromium-6 is actually way more toxic to humans and ecosystems than microplastics. But don't get me wrong, both are bad. So what does this all mean? It means there are trade-offs. PU and mycelium overall have less of an environmental impact than bovine leather. On the other hand, leather, when well maintained, can last decades. None of these materials are perfect. My job isn't to tell you which one is better. It's to give you the facts, the full picture, so that you can decide what matters most to you and make better, more informed fashion choices.